Let's talk about one of the biggest questions out there. Where does evil actually come from? It's a question that has kept people up at night for thousands of years. Well, today, we're going to dig into two really ancient stories that give us a fascinating and, frankly, a terrifying answer.
You know, is evil something that's just baked into us, a flaw in our own nature, or is it something else? An outside force that corrupts an otherwise good world. These stories we're looking at, they lean hard into that second idea. And the way they say it was unleashed, it's a pretty chilling tale. And what's absolutely wild is how two totally different narratives, one called the Parable of the Mountain Lamps and the other, the Lore of the Library of the Watchers, end up telling the exact same story. They give us the same answer. So let's get into it. To really get a handle on the fall, you first have to understand what things were like before the fall. We need to see the original setup, this state of divine order that existed before everything went sideways. So in one story, you've got these bright keepers, who are basically beings of pure light. And in the other, you have the librarians, also called the wakeful ones, and you might know them better as the Watchers from ancient Enochian lore. Both groups were created for a single, vital purpose: to watch over humanity. And here's the kicker. Their mandate was incredibly specific. Watch, but do not interfere. From their posts, way up high, they were meant to be these silent, detached guardians. Their job was to hold the line through vigilance alone, never, ever getting directly involved in the lives of humans down below. So you have this perfect order, this sacred duty. How does it all come crashing down? Well, it all boiled down to a single choice, a conscious decision to walk away from their post, all because they were lured by a temptation that they just couldn't resist. And this is where the two stories just lock in together perfectly. In both allegories, these divine guardians were completely overwhelmed by a deep longing for an earthly connection. The keepers felt their divine light was cold and lonely. The watchers, on the other hand, were captivated by the beauty of mortal women. In both cases, they were willing to throw away everything just for a taste of the mortal world. And let's be really clear here. This wasn't an accident or a moment of weakness. Oh no. This was a full-blown, premeditated rebellion. The leader of the Watchers, a guy named Samyaza, actually made all the others swear a binding oath on Mount Hermon. They were all in it together, and there was absolutely no going back. Now, when these celestial beings descended to Earth, they brought their divine knowledge with them. But these weren't gifts, they were poisoned. Things that should have been blessings turned into curses, and humanity was about to pay a very steep price. This right here illustrates that corruption perfectly. You have the flame of truth, which was once this pure guiding light, but in their hands, it gets twisted into the forge of ambition. A tool that was meant for enlightenment became an engine for war and for worldly power. The parallels are just undeniable. It's almost a one-to-one mapping. The parables sharpening stones into swords is literally the Watcher Azazel teaching humanity how to make weapons. The brewing of potions is their leader Samyaza teaching sorcery and root cutting. They even introduce things like cosmetics and dyes, just fueling human vanity. This wasn't just a fall, it was the birth of a darker, more violent age for humankind. And this unnatural union, this mixing of the celestial and the mortal, well, it created monsters. In one story, they're called the Giants of Greed. In the other, we know them as the Nephilim. But whatever you call them, they were a plague upon the earth, violent, ravenous, and the living, breathing embodiment of the cosmic chaos that had just been unleashed. Okay, so the world is drowning in violence and chaos. A divine line has been crossed, and the fundamental order of the cosmos has been completely shattered. It was time for a reckoning. And the punishment that came down wasn't just severe, it was symmetrical. It was almost poetic. The fallen weren't just punished randomly. Their sentences were tailored to perfectly mirror their crimes. So Samyaza, the ringleader, was bound and left in the valleys of the earth. Azazel, who taught all that corruption, was cast into an abyss of total darkness. But the fate of the bright keepers from the parable, that might be the most fitting punishment of all. They were bound in the very iron they had forged. Think about that. Their own ambition drove them to teach the art of weapon making, and now those same weapons became their eternal chains. The very tool of their transgression became the instrument of their punishment. But here's the thing. Punishing the fallen didn't just wipe the slate clean. The damage was done.
In fact, their rebellion left this permanent scar on the world, a scar that would become the theological origin story for evil spirits for centuries.
So according to this tradition, here's what happened. When those giants, the Nephilim, were finally killed off in the Great Flood, their physical bodies were gone, but their hybrid spirits, half celestial, half mortal, couldn't move on. They were trapped here on Earth, and they became the malicious, disembodied spirits we call demons, forever plaguing humanity. Now, why is this so important? Because it completely reframes the entire concept of evil. It's not just some flaw inside of us. It's an external force, a spiritual predator that was unleashed upon the world by one single ancient act of celestial defiance. And the moral of the story couldn't be clearer. It's summed up perfectly right here. Power without responsibility is a fire that consumes itself. When those who are given great power abandon their sacred duty, they risk unleashing forces that they can never hope to control. Ultimately, these ancient tales are a warning, right? They're about what happens when our knowledge grows faster than our wisdom. And that brings the question right to our doorstep today. In our own age of incredible technology, what's our forge of ambition? And are we ready to face the consequences?